there are always three sides to every single story. My dad's, Uncle Fred's, and the one we're going to hear today. Welcome to another episode of the Son of a podcast. As I mentioned last week, we split the episode into two, and this is the second part. And today we're going down into the really nitty-gritty. We're talking about my uncle's relationship with his siblings, my dad and obviously my other uncle and aunts, as well as the really important part, his relationship with my grandfather, which we've only really heard my dad's side of the story and Uncle Fred's side of the story, whereas now we're going to hear the eldest brother's side of the story, Uncle Chendo. And I think this was a really eye-opening talk for me, and I really learned a lot about kind of my whole family and everything, and what everyone thinks and how everything went down. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I definitely did, and yeah. So we've said that you've kind of been jumping everywhere, and throughout this whole journey of yours, moving from one city to the other, moving away thousands of kilometers away, how did you keep in touch with your family and your friends and your siblings?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like, I really love the relationship I have with my siblings, right? And you know, it hasn't been easy, right? Because the truth is that since I left at 19, right? Yeah. I'm 55 now. Okay, so I've been really lived in Spain. I've been outside of Spain longer than I have been in Spain at this point. But you know, and also as a family, you know, we are what we are as a family, right? Like, you know, Lorena talks to my wife, your aunt, talks to her sister daily basis. The only time they don't talk is weekends because they're each doing their own thing, right?
Yeah.
But they have a daily phone call, you know, and like Lorena, your aunt, can't understand why I'm not calling, you know, your dad and all the others. Like, she's like, why don't you guys freaking talk? What is it about you people that you don't talk? You seem to talk to. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, Albert's easy. He was not going to pick up the phone. Like, I don't recall, like, you know, actually Albert picks up the phone if I'm here. But if I'm calling from anywhere, it's like,
that's true.
That phone ain't going to get picked up, right?
That's true.
Having said that, you know, I've always felt very close to all of them, even though we've only been able to really connect face to face every couple of years, right? And I'm very proud, like, at least at my particular sort of level, that I've never really picked a beef with any of them, right? We have beefs in the family, right? We know that. That's been talked about in the podcast. But at least, you know, I have, I think, really great relationships with each of them. I mean, I wish we spoke more often, but I also feel like, you know, I'm not missing out on everything that happens, right? Yeah. So I like the relationship we have. I think we've been able to nurture it over the years. It isn't the same thing for sure as being all together in the same place, but that just hasn't been a possibility yet.
Yeah.
Right. You know, but I like it. I do wish we talked more.
That's something that I really want to pick up because, you know, when I was like a year ago, right, I was feeling kind of guilty for not like staying in contact with you, Gabe. But I'm super grateful that as we're getting older, we have like more of a chance to connect. Yeah. And we have like more of time to kind of like text and catch up because we're at like the same level, you know? And honestly, kind of personal, there was the kind of passing of a certain figure who really like motivated me to like be a better person and to like reach out to my cousins more often. Yeah. And I can't wait to like continue to like speak to you more over the time.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. Yeah. It's great. I mean, that's definitely one thing now with technology and with the internet and with phones. It's a lot easier for us to do it, for, you know, me and Victor, compared to you and your siblings when you went to the States in the early 90s, because back then it would have been letters that got to Spain a month, 2 months later. Yeah. No, maybe probably something like that.
And we've all developed differently over time. Like, when I think about, you know, for better for worse, I was the eldest one. I say for better for worse because that has upsides and downsides, right?
Well, we're going to get back on that later.
We're going to get back for sure. You know. And you know, like, I mean, I wish I'd been a better brother many times, you know, to most of them, especially your dad. You know what I mean? Like,
I mentioned that in our podcast, right?
Yeah. thing. You know?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. Yeah, the fact that you and Teresa have always somehow adopted the older brother mentality, even though Teresa's like almost 3 years younger than me, right? So there's something in you that there was never really a need for it, really. And in fact, I was mentioning before that I found a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you remember this, Chendo, but you wrote me a letter.
I did
When you
before I left. Yes, absolutely.
I think you gave it to me like, here you go. Read it after I'm gone,
Later
type
the
thing.
night, yeah.
And that letter was basically apologizing for having been a bad older brother, you know. And I thought, but well, you're not my older brother. You're my bro. You know, we're just buddies. You know, I never saw you as an older brother.
No, but there were little situations, little things I did, you know, where I was like, just like, you know, little things where, you know what I mean.
Friends do. There's no big deal.
Okay.
It's no.
Well, I'm glad you see it that way, because for me, like, I'm still sort of half
But that went on for
traumatized by
years.
that.
But that went on for
Like,
years. You know, for a long time. Until like maybe 20 years ago. I'm not saying until we stopped being teenagers. Every time we saw each other, you were like, you know, hey, little brother, how are you? You know, what can I do for you? Yeah, look, are you looking better? Are you working now? You know, and I'd be like, what? You know, I'd be like, dude, don't treat me like a you know. To me, it was just like meeting up with like a really good old friend, rather than an older brother who had to mentor me. And I think that affected you more than it affected me.
Yeah,
because I really never saw you like an older brother. I saw us three as the trifecta, you know, the three buddies that helped each other out, but as friends, not as older brothers or your younger brothers or anything.
Honestly,
that's a good.
I'm
glad you see it that way.
I do have like a take that will help you reframe it, right?
Okay.
Being like kind of forced into a situation where you need to like step up and like kind of be like a parental figure for like 4 younger siblings, it was perfect training for raising a neurodivergent son. Because every single time that I was being a bit difficult or being like kind of difficult to like calm down, my father had like excellent experience from you guys to kind of like raise me up and to make sure that I went like further.
Sure.
So you shouldn't feel too guilty because it was perfect training for raising a son, for better or for worse, who can be kind of difficult like me. So yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that.
That's good take. Good one, Victor.
Yeah, it is very
But anyway, I love the relationship I have with all of them, and you know, we've all grown up in different ways, very different personalities, like pretty freaking mind-blowing how different everyone is, right? And it's just great to see. I think one of the wonderful things about getting old is that you kind of like, you know, you review your life, and it's just great. I mean, Jesus Christ, like, would you ever imagine that, you know, he would marry, you know, Karen, and that we would have kids, and that we would be together? What an amazing thing to feel.
We're having a special guest in the background here.
Yes.
We love you, Aunt Karen.
Love you guys.
So for me, like, one of the things I love about getting old is this. It's like, Jesus Christ, like this, you know, like
You're getting old, man. I'm not getting old.
oldish. You know what I mean? It's fantastic. I love that. So it's cool. It's cool to see time flowing forward. You know what I mean?
What hasn't changed? Obviously, we're older, life, kids, all the rest of it. But what is the Chendo now? Still the Chendo from?
I mean, most like pretty like 80% of it. I would say 80% of it. I know. I feel like, you know, you guys have developed this idea that suddenly I'm like the preppy guy. I'm like Ferris Bueller, you know, corporate dude, you know, short haircut. You know what I mean? Like, but I'm not. You know, and you know, part of the problem, or one of the quirky things I think about me, is that I never seem to fit in anywhere. Like, you know, when I was in the UK, people asked me like where in the US or Canada I was from, because I said neither, none of the above. When I'm in the States, they're like, like what's your background? You know, they're like, oh, your English is so good, like, but you're not from here. What's that all about?
Remember, you had to sacrifice a piece of your name, like post 9/11. Remember?
Yeah. I mean, when they my last name?
Like, yeah, Hernandez.
True.
They changed your name, and you do not take it well. Like, it's like kind of like the like sensitive story of when you were rejected service at like a little like cafe, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's the same level of
But that was just bureaucracy there. Yeah. We'll go into that in a minute. But you know, when I come back to Spain now, they look at me, you know, and they're like, you like, where in Colombia are you from? Like, Spain, you know, or Mexico? Yeah, you know, because you know, my Spanish accent is not as Spanish as it used to be after so many years out. You know what I mean? And and my eyes get smaller all the time. So I'm like, and I got a combination of my mom's, your grandma's and your grandpa's eyes. I'm Pablo Benitez apparently. So I never seem to fit in. Like everywhere I go, I always have to explain, right? It's like, where are you from? I was like, oh shit, here we go. Well, I was,
It's
my
the
dad's from
phenotype.
here, my mom's from there. Oh, so you're Spanish? Well, actually, I was born in Nicaragua. Oh, so you're Nicaraguan? Well, fuck no, because, and that's okay. You kind of learn to live that way, and I think in a way it's liberating because it gives you, it gives you the flexibility of really being a citizen of the world.
True.
When Lorena and I became American citizens, I was like, fuck me. Finally, Victor, her and I have something in common, because prior to that, it was like we're all born in different places, so.
Yeah, it's the phenotype. Look, we both have like the black hair and the brown eyes. People ask, where are you from?
Well, I believe I have dark brown hair, but anyway, that's a family debate.
It used to be dark brown.
Huh?
At least you still got your hair.
Not in salt and
I'm
pepper.
losing my hair.
Are you really?
Hello.
No. It's like, is everybody?
How you doing?
Anybody? So it's,
I got a question for you. I don't know. Sorry, you were gonna say something.
Well, actually, before that, I want
Yeah.
to go into the what Victor mentioned of you having to change your surname.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they did it for me. We arrived in the U.S. in June 2001. So,
Yeah.
3 months before 9/11. After 9/11, a lot of things changed in America, right? And one of the things that changed is they became more like a normal country in terms of bureaucracy, right? And so one of the things that they changed is that if you were not a U.S. citizen or a resident and you were going to renew your driver's license, you needed to show up with your passport, which in any other country that's like a normal thing, but in the U.S. it was not a done thing. That's an infringement on your personal liberty. So I had to show up to renew my driver's license in Florida with my Spanish passport, which says, in Spain we've got
2 surnames.
you've got a first name. Most of us have a middle name, and then we've got your mom's and your dad's last name.
Yeah.
So it's 4. It's a block of 4, indicators. Whereas in the U.S. you've got your first, middle, and last name.
Yeah.
In most cases, right? People are starting to hyphenate now. So at the time I showed up with my Spanish passport. It said Rosendo Emilio Chavarria Jimenez, right? Up to that point, my driver's license said Rosendo E. Chavarria. So everywhere I went in the U.S., all my credit cards, debit cards, everything was Rosendo E. Chavarria. But this lady, whatever, Atch, and I gave her my old license, Rosendo E. Chavarria, gave her my passport, Rosendo E. Chavarria Jimenez, right? They take my picture, they return my new license, and my new license now has become Rosendo C. Jimenez.
Right.
Because she's like, she ignored my middle name, she assumed my middle name was Chavarria,
Right.
and she made my last name Jimenez,
What a pain.
right? And I'm like, and I'm sorry, it's not like she was from Iowa, she was not, right? Like, oye, papo, ¿cómo tú estás? Right? So it's not like she was like, oh, I'm so ignorant of the rules of Spanish language surnames. No, bad, right? And I'm like, I was like, what is this?
We have that here the other way around.
Yeah.
Oh,
And the same question. Like, it's not like
they're asking you for your 4th last
Well,
name.
no, they were trying to call Zoe Bloy Dawson, because I'm Bloy Dawson and Jess is Bloy Dawson.
So it's just
And we were like, is this a first foreigner in Torremolinos? You know what I'm saying?
That's
same
hilarious.
as Karen is Karen Sewed in very often places, because you have to have 2 surnames. They don't, they might not understand that people don't
So
have
yeah, it's ridiculous.
Right.
2 surnames in the rest of the world.
So I walked in to the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, with one name, and I walked out with another. I was like, what is this? She's like, no, that's your new license. Like, the fuck it is. It's like, you have changed my identity. Do you realize? She's like, oye, papo, ¿qué tú? You know what I mean? And so I'm like, listen, what you've done is consequential to me, motherfucker, right? Like, who am I moving forward, right? Every other aspect of my identity is tied to a different name. But it's like, oye, 9/11. Aquí pasó 9/11. So it was like, luckily we moved to California where, things came back to normal. But that's what Victor was kind of talking about. That lady in the DMV, right? It's what happens when you give certain bureaucrats too much power, right?
So wherever you are,
Yes.
we expect an
I'm
apology.
gonna look for you. Te voy a buscar, mami.
Right?
Right.
So I wanted to
Yeah,
ask
that's
about, because we've pretty much covered everything that we've been covering in our podcast,
Mm-hmm.
except, and you just touched on family. But how have you coped with family? Because I've got very specific points of view on family, and they can be construed as very standoffish. It's like I'm my own thing, and right, I don't answer the phone and things like that. I have thankfully cleared the record in our podcast saying that I love you guys to bits, just as we have a great
Just for the
relationship,
record?
despite all that. But I'm pretty extreme in my points of view when it comes to our upbringing, our Catholic upbringing,
Right.
praying nonstop for something that never happened. I think Gaywood has always wanted to know what's your point of view, or the other
Sure.
siblings' point of view
Sure.
on that, because he's got my point of view, and that's the reason why you're not a Catholic at all.
Yeah.
I'd like you to talk about it because I don't want him or Victor, for that matter,
Yeah.
to think that or to know what your point of view is. I mean, it might be the
Sure.
same. It could be exactly the same. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a complicated
Father,
one.
mother, love, siblings,
I mean,
responsibilities.
I think mom, your grandma, you guys, I mean, I think for me, she was always super consistent, right? Like, super intelligent woman, loving all her life, right? So she was always like, just somebody that she was always the same, consistent, loving sort of individual. I think our relationship with your grandfather changed over time, right? And I could break it down into chunks. I think for me, like growing up,
Sorry, I'm laughing because Fred and I have a joke that we can't.
He's crying. That's why he's laughing.
I know, that's fine. I'll cry too. With my dad, with your grandpa, your Grandpa Chendo, I think Grandpa Chendo was a complicated individual, and that showed in the relationship with his children, right?
Oh, yeah.
I remember when your dad and I were little, I remember a chappy childhood in Madrid, right? We used to go to the park, we used to play. No, you don't?
Yeah, no, I remember that. It was
Right, just
I'm laughing
regular,
because it was such a contrast to
Yeah.
the years. And
Sure, your Aunt Judith and Aunt Teresa were little back then. I remember as a perfectly normal, kind of middle class sort of upbringing, maybe a little bit, maybe a little upper middle class upbringing in Madrid. I remember, I have certain snapshots of memories. I remember me reading books all the time. Like, I used to love all the different books we had. I remember our bedroom. I remember once we broke the window to the balcony, and you and I were chasing each other in the apartment.
yeah,
and
that's where I had
I
the
think you
scar,
kind of ran. Yeah, you ran through the window.
You broke the window with me.
You see, that's the beginning of my trauma. Is the bad old brother.
I still got the scar right
That's the
here.
beginning.
Yeah.
Right, I have a memory of me playing in the rooftop where they used to hang the laundry back then, and playing with the maid, Mili, or the maid / my first crush, tickling me falling back and banging my head against. I required 2 stitches.
Yeah.
I have memories of Sundays going to the toy store, Pilos.
That's true.
There was a family toy store. We used to go there, and we were allowed to pick one thing. Within reason, right? You couldn't pick out like, I want to get this like life-size SUV, whatever. But I just remember, going through the hall, the little sort of alleyways, the aisles down the toy store to pick up the one thing we could get. Normally I got a Hyperman. So those were really nice memories. I do though already at that time, I remember missing my dad, missing your grandpa who used to travel a lot. And even then I remember as in Jiloca even, missing him. Like, where's dad? Is dad gonna show up? And so I remember a happy childhood. Sorry, And then when I was about 10, your dad, your Uncle Albert was probably 9 or 8. Things went poorly for us, right? And I remember, your grandpa would say, tell us things like, hey, things are really tough. Pray for us. I'd be like, God. I remember feeling this terrible sense of responsibility. Like if I don't pray hard enough,
That's exactly what I
if I don't pray hard enough, it's like,
You're doing it wrong.
you know, yes. It's like, if I need to pray more. It's like I'm doing something wrong.
Seriously.
At what point
Yes.
is this when you first moved here, or just a little bit
Yes,
later?
this was just before we moved here. This was maybe
before
a
you
year,
moved
maybe
here?
a year before we moved here. Yeah, I think
Really?
so.
Well, I
Okay.
can't remember any of that.
We were in yeah. I remember we were in Madrid.
My first memory of that downfall was actually during a summer, where we were informed that we were not going back to our huge house in Madrid with you know, a 2-tiered garden and things like that. That's my first memory of things going badly in that summer. They said we're not going back. We're going to Malaga. And I remember being heartbroken because we had our dogs in Madrid. I thought, what's going to happen with our dogs? And I forced my parents to go past our house in Madrid before moving down here, because I had to see our dogs before moving down. And that's my first recollection of things going bad. I didn't know that it'd been.
No, there was a period before then, and you know, like if I put 2 and 2 together, well, other than Dad saying, "Hey, pray hard," because you know we're having real money problems.
So it started early.
I remember times when, you know, I guess we weren't paying our phone bills, and you know they would cut the phone. I remember
But that was
Mom,
here. That was in Madrid.
Yes,
Really?
and I remember Mom, you know, making excuses to friends. No, you know, I think the dogs must have bitten into the wiring, and you know, so we're having it repaired. But you know, it was because we hadn't paid our bills, and so it started a little bit before then, right?
How do you feel about all that? Because I think that must have been the beginning of my resentment towards the Catholic vibe guiding our family, in the sense that they had that duality. You know, you have to be meek, you have to pray, you have to take things as they come. At the same time, you have to lie to your neighbors to tell them that the dog ate the cable because you can't pay your phone bill. You know,
but look, I mean,
and I always thought, you know, so what are we doing here exactly? We're trying to keep up pretending that we're rich when we're not, and at the same time we're not allowed to lie. So what are we doing?
but the reality is that that's not unusual, you know, and it has to do with, you know, where you are in the social strata, and at a certain level,
Yeah, for sure.
it's you know, as a family, it's very hard to, you know, give up, or even in certain circles, you don't want to be that family, or you don't want to be the ones that are going downhill, because nobody will touch you when
Keeping
you're
up
used
appearances.
to.
And that's when I started seeing, because at that time we were, like you say, 8 or 9 years old. That's when I started realizing that I was different, because I couldn't see any of that. I mean, not in Madrid so much, because I can't remember. But once we were here and we met you guys at Sunnyview School, and we were like, you know, hey, who are these guys? You know, these little schmucks that you say. Once I got past that, once I got past that,
That's exactly who we were.
Yeah, I really couldn't see what the point was of keeping up with the Joneses and pretending to be something that we weren't. And I remember sitting there being really conflicted with our parents, where they were trying to do that, you know, and they were trying to, you know, I didn't see it in you guys, for instance. You were perfectly happy in the way we were. I used to sit down and really think about it and think, you know, why are we lying to our cousins and our uncles, pretending that we're something that we're not? What is the point? I couldn't see the point when.
But I think at that point the cat was out of the bag. But you have to also consider that this isn't a family where, you know, Dad was, you know, a great plumber and he built a good plumbing business, and then we had a little bit of money.
He was pretty bad at everything. Yeah?
But what I'm saying is that, you know, as a family, who we were it goes back, right? It goes back several generations, and so when you've carved a certain place in society over many years, then it's hard to sort of give that up. You know, like where your grandma came from, right? Your grandma is not. You know, they come from a family that has long-standing roots.
And that's our parents, and they can't help that, because that's the way they were brought up for generations. But you, as a child, what did you think? Because I'm saying what I thought. I was incredibly conflicted. I couldn't see any, especially once we got our roots down here, and we discovered our friendship with our friends, and everything else for me was absolutely 100% secondary. I didn't mind living in a tiny little dump, or living in a palace with a huge, you know, a huge red fireplace like we had, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was no need for that if what was around you was quality stuff. And and I was always conflicted. So I was just wondering what your take on that was.
So that's the first. You said it's in 3 stages. That was the
Yeah.
first stage.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Where's
right,
the second
so that's,
stage?
so then the second one is the beginning of this, right? Is this dramatic situation where, for you explained to me better, what happened, of how dad went downhill, and it was that middle phase where he was still, do you remember he was living in Madrid because he was making better money there,
Coming down with
but not enough to sustain our lifestyle prior, but it was good enough to sustain a lifestyle in Malaga. So during that time, your grandpa would work in Madrid. He would live in Madrid during the week and then take a bus down to Malaga every week, and he would come in Saturday mornings, in fact, and he would make breakfast for all of us. Remember those eggs? He would like poach eggs with tomato and bacon, and then he would go back up on Sunday night or Monday morning. I forget now.
Throughout the years after, sorry to interrupt you, after years and years later, when Fred and I used to have breakfast with him every Saturday, it became quite clear, although he never said any details, but it became pretty clear that those weekends that he came down, because he was living in Madrid earning more money, he wasn't really earning any money at all. He was desperately trying to become the person he used to be before, and try to recover the money he'd lost.
Oh, I didn't know
by
that.
any possible means.
I didn't know that.
We had a bit of a theory to do with your dad's business acumen. That was a little bit of a Forrest Gump in a sense, where he was like right time, right place in many situations that gave him, that sort of lifted economically, and that then when that was taken away, he didn't really have the mechanisms to get it.
To get it
You know what I'm saying? That seemed to be the summation of about, I don't know, 1,000 hours of
I think
conversation.
I think that's pretty much what it was.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into the third phase where, like, even all of that, is like, we were in La Bagatela, and we could still, or they were paying the school for a while at least, and then we quickly move into the next phase, which is that's not sustainable, right? And then we move to La Carretera de Cádiz, the apartment with the basketball, court, the basketball court.
By the
right?
whorehouse.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, that's kind of the third phase where, where things just never really sort of picked up from there. And if anything, they sort of came down. And then, yes, then he tried to become entrepreneurial again and set up the computing school and stuff, which I think on and off, so that was kind of the terminal phase.
That was useful for me because it got me started on the IT, the path.
But
of IT.
one of the things that's become clear to me is that, and this talks about the complexity of your grandpa as a person. One thought I have is that I don't know how his mind changed during this time, and I think his mind changed, and I think, I remember, an intelligent man like your grandpa who had been involved in things, I believe, I still want to believe that, at a fairly high level, he, in a company he probably could have done really well. He became somebody who he was unable to give me any advice. Like somebody like Dad would have been incredible in giving me advice, how to build a career, how to move myself around the company, how to promote myself better. He was incapable. He was like, I don't know, I can't tell you how to run your...
That's great that you said that. I never thought about that.
He became incapable of it, and I'm like, dude, you've dealt with people that are very important. You've dealt in levels of, business and influence and politics, and you can't help me out. But I genuinely believe that his morale was so crushed that he was like, I am no longer able to provide any useful input to anyone, like including myself, right? So I think your grandpa's mindset changed over time.
And I think you're right there.
He was always very egotistical.
Let's call
his
this mindset
out, right?
changed.
Right.
But I think the reason why he couldn't give you any advice is because he'd never actually lived any of that. Because of this Forrest Gump effect. I think it's true that he probably dealt with not very important people, but semi-important at that time, right? We were talking about the 80s and the 90s where the world was much more disconnected, right? So if you knew somebody halfway important, that was like your niche, that was the thing. Like, I know this guy, right? But he never actually really moved around the corporate world. I think it was kind of like just hanging out, and he gave the right advice to somebody who took it and brought him along. But I don't think he never had that stamina to say, if you want to do this, this is how you do it, because this is the way I did it. I don't think he ever.
But he could own a room. Really, one thing Dad could do is he could own a room,
and that's what,
right? And he could run a meeting. And he could be like, right?
He could.
He had that charisma. He had this charisma about him, I think, right?
That's the big question that I have for you to do with this is, I grew up, you probably heard it, the other podcast, for me, and many people, your dad was like a hero. And because I was living away, I'd come back occasionally on holiday and stuff and see it. And there was like a point at which it seemed that amongst all the siblings, he'd gone from hero to zero. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it because the whole money economic thing was such a slow process of like decades long. I couldn't put my finger on what was it, like it, almost as if each one had their own reason for having that thought. Maybe I don't know. It's a common thing, but I'm super curious to know when did your dad go from being the coolest dad that anyone's ever had? Because we all thought that. You know what I mean? And for me, it was like, well, I adored him. To suddenly not that. Well, for you personally.
Well, I mean, I think so. One thing I will say is that I believe he had a very different relationship with each of us.
Right. Okay.
To be honest with you, right? And
He did. Yeah.
right. And I think, I think he had favorites. I think Teresa was always a favorite. I think I was always a favorite because I was the first. I think in his mind. Right? So I think he was always more forgiving with me than with some of the others. I think he was never forgiving with Albert, and he was never forgiving with Judith. And he's been semi-tolerant of Lucas, right? Just because Lucas sort of came in at the end, and Lucas basically raised himself, right? And so I think he had a very different relationship with each of us. But I think over time, especially in that third phase toward the end, each of us, I think, to a certain extent, got to experience how, in a way, my dad's ego always ended up getting the best of him, right? I think there were certain things he couldn't help himself, right? Every time any money came his way or whatever, that money was already kind of spoken for. Like it would sort of disappear very quickly. And then, for me, certainly, it was the famous gift from, Tio Miguel, where for once we had a way out. It's like, for years and
Financial.
years and decades, yes. Each of us were doing what we could in terms of providing for him and my mom. And then suddenly, Miguel said, okay, enough. And he was probably, clearly he was influenced by his wife's family, who said, look, this guy's a liability. He's a vacuum cleaner. Whatever money goes there, it will be sucked up. So let's protect our wealth. And he said, okay, you know what? We're going to do a one-off gift, a one-off donation to help you out. And, and that was, the sky opened up because like, well, finally, Dad has and Mom have this kind of resources. They have this pot of money that your great uncle gave Dad, your grandpa, to help him out. And that money, we all know what happened to that money. Well, I don't know what happened to all of it, but I know that none of it was wisely spent. Mm-hmm. And, suddenly within months, this cash, and so for me, it was maybe enlightening. Maybe I was the last one to kind of realize this part of my dad, but I have given my personal guarantee to Miguel that we would make sure that this money was not squandered. And we tried until the day your grandfather turned around and said, oh, who are you to manage my money, right? Because I had insisted that we open an account in Teresa's name and that she administer the funds. And he just pulled a fit and he said, what the fuck? And, you guys are traitors. And so I said, okay, you know what?
So was that the moment where it really sort of
shifted? For me, it was, because okay, you know what? Okay, you know what, you're right, you're not a baby.
I think
you're
it
happy
was
about
for everybody except for me. I'd seen it coming because I was
You
already.
saw it earlier, no, with the gamma.
Right,
I'd already been
Yes.
working with him before. So
Yes, and you had been exposed much more than me.
I had that pretty much that same conversation that you had about the bank account, which I didn't know about actually. I had a similar one in an incident that I mentioned in the podcast. You know, it was very, you know, it wasn't such high end. It wasn't such a huge deal. It was just like driving the girls. But that made me see the moment where my dad said, you know, a father should never have to ask his son for anything. The son should always know. In other words, you guys, the reason you guys are here are to serve me, type thing. You know, that's your job, and that's your role in life. And that changed everything for me. It had been ramping up, but that was, for me, that was like a clincher. And I think that for everybody else, it seems to be the story of my life. I see things and then I tell people and nobody believes me until they happen, right? And then 7 years later, it's like, hey, why are you guys surprised?
I see that, people. Maybe you're right.
At work, I get the same thing. I have a plan. I say, you know, we should do this because this is going to happen. Everybody's like,
So on this, if you were moving money from the equation, let's imagine that he had generational wealth from the Nicaragua days in the trust fund. Do you think if money hadn't been a factor, he would have gone from fall from grace? Or would it have just been seen as a charming, charismatic brainiac that dances around with the money from the family?
I mean, I think the way he presented himself to others was different, you know. I think to others, I mean, I remember when we invited your grandpa to come visit with us in San Francisco, and there was one night where a colleague of mine from Visa came over for dinner. Trust me, this is relevant. And I saw him, and I saw him in action again. I saw him in action again. Right, this is Yolanda. Yeah, she's like a
put a show on type of thing.
Yeah, and I think obviously he was interested in her. And he just, or even if he wasn't, he's like, oh, you know, hey, I'm a man, you're a woman, let's make things happen. He, like, your grandpa, he switched on this persona, and I'm watching him, and I can see her like 20 years, you know, and he's like, God damn, you know. So I believe that externally, he would have continued to be that person, right? If he had been, you know.
I think it was born to be that
continued
person.
to be that way, yeah.
And I think money played an integral role in Dad's life. I think it was apart from, I think God took over the role of money later on, but really Dad's thing was money. If he had that, he had to show he was a peacock with the feathers, and money was his feathers. And that allowed him to be the charming and intellectual person he is, because that's what he was. He liked studying, he liked showing his intellect. And the only way he could do that was without having to worry about working and things like that. You know.
I also think that the part of this whole breakdown, right, this mental sort of challenge he had, I think part of it we saw in this, the rise of the conspiracy, like his whole life of conspiracy theories started the minute things started going downhill for us financially.
We came up with a theory at one point that, you know, he was always forecasting the end of the world, such a date. And we came up with a theory that it always seemed to coincide with more or less his life expectancy at the time. Right. You know, so we thought so we kept on adding it. And do you think there's any correlation between how you guys all felt as a collective, time-wise, in terms of ramping up that feeling with your mom passing? Like, was there a degree of blame from your perspective at least, with your mom going through a tough time? You know.
I mean, probably, you know, you always want to think, I mean, when I think about, you know, my mom's last few years, it was bad. I mean, I'm almost glad I wasn't here to see it. If I'm being candid with everyone right now, I know this is a horrible way I feel so selfish for saying this, but, you know, when I used to see mom's deterioration and the state she was in, and, you know, I mean, could we have done more? Should we have done more? Could I have done more with more money? Like, should I have invested more in better healthcare? You know, could she have had a different end or a different quality of life if Dad hadn't sort of squandered those funds? I don't know, maybe yes, maybe no, but, you know, but there's so many questions about that, you know?
What's the time, because I was in England, so this whole money, this thing with your uncle, that final big bang.
No, that final
and
big
then-
bang happened. My mom was already quite sick by then.
And so, what sort of time period was there between that and then your mom passing away? Like, are we talking a year or 2 years or 3 years?
We were already living in our last house, right?
Yeah.
We were in El Palo. We were already in El Palo at this point.
Yeah, my mom's deterioration. The very night it started was way before then. It was with the beginnings of the computer school. So that must have been 97, 98 or something like that. She was quite ill for like 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years before that. So by the time the whole money thing happened, this big bang money thing happened, she was already quite ill. She was already.
You'd be contributing financially from afar for decades, right? Before, right? By the time.
Yeah, more or less.
From
Since I was
England.
25.
Do you have any guilt to do with all this stuff that we're talking about, or do you think you've just done what you can from afar and the best?
No,
way?
I mean, I'll always think like, how much more could I have given? How much more should I have given? You know, it was never enough, and I'll always feel like I didn't give enough. Always, I always feel that way.
But is it a financial guilt or is it a presential guilt or both?
I think it's. No, look. I think that if I had been in Spain, I probably wouldn't have been able to help. So I'm glad I was not in Spain, because I think it's because of that I've been able to afford the support, right? But of course, I'll always feel like it wasn't enough. Why didn't I give half my money, right? Why didn't I have to give 60% of my paycheck instead of 10 or 20? Why couldn't I have given $30,000 a year? Why couldn't I have paid for a? Well, I don't know. Why couldn't I pay for him to be with Yayo in that nice kind of home instead of stuck in that fridge up in that shitty village?
Don't feel guilty, Dad. You did. You did the most that you can do, and that's really what matters.
Right, but I'll always feel like I could have done more, right? And
I think there's a couple of sides to this. There's the Dad's point of view on all this. He mentioned it to me and Fred quite a few times before he went. Was he had this practical thing, which was, when a problem exists, if it takes you more than 30 seconds to solve it, you forget there's a problem. And he really truly believed
that was eye-opening for us.
It was eye-opening because
that was in the context of how did he deal with this problem? How do you deal with that problem?
So basically, mom's illness didn't exist. He couldn't solve it, so he put it out of his mind, which means that he didn't try to solve it anymore. See what I mean? He wasn't like, she's my wife, she's dying, I gotta do anything I can.
Yeah.
And that really was his tantra. Anything that happened, it was, if he couldn't solve it.
Going right back to the whole Nigerian disaster,
Nigeria
the investment and that
Exactly. Yes.
It started right back. That's when we were pressing him on that.
And that's what made me think about my theory of family, which is what the arguments I've had with Teresa and probably plays on your guilt as well, which is, once you have your family, right? You have Victor, you have Lorena, they're your family, not us, not your parents.
That is something I somewhat disagree with, Uncle Al, because I believe that while you should invest most of your resources into your inner family, once you have that covered, you need to basically go out and extend resources to kind of your extended family as well, because you did grow up with your siblings at the end of the day. And plus...
But you say that now, but then every time I talk about retirement, what do you say?
Don't do it, because you can support not only your inner family, but also your external family as well.
Right.
You can
so Victor, just to be clear, I agree with that. You have families, right? You're not in isolation. What I totally disagree with is something that what Teresa has done in the past is make your family suffer to support your extended family. In this case, your parents.
I agree. So here's how it should be. You should honestly communicate it in a way to say, look, we cannot provide, say, a stimulus or stipend this particular month, but we might be able to do so after a certain amount of time when we have more resources available. Until then, we're going to keep the resources into the inner family, but we'll support you as soon as we can. We basically have to use a communication like that. But I do believe we are both capable of supporting our inner family and our external. I don't have the resources to support the external yet because I'm not employed yet. But as soon as I have it, I will.
I'm sure you will.
I will. I'll help you guys.
And look, I think part of the
Uncle Al.
part of the trauma that I think all of us carry, right? And including you also, Al, because you're at the end of the day, you're part of the family. Is this idea of just seeing this unravel in front of our eyes, right? So I think when you look at the way each of us have grown up and developed, I think mission number one for all of us has been
survival.
Not on my watch, no, but it's been like this will not happen to me.
Yeah, true,
right?
Totally true.
So to your point, like for me, it's like okay, I'm going to make sure, number one, that I never have to depend on Victor when I'm old, right? I want to make sure that Victor has what I never was able to have, which is an education, right? So that's why I always say, it's like, hey, dude, your education is budgeted, man. That's one freaking thing that I'm going to budget for is your education.
There are times when I feel really guilty about kind of taking out my dad's resources. Like, don't give me that extra money. Please invest it. Please keep it to yourself. And there are moments when, honestly, I want to make sure that like others around me are supported because I do not like taking people's resources. Fun fact: if I'm ever given a stimulus check by the government, no, I'm not touching it. Because I believe in independence.
What does change, Victor, from my perspective at least, is when you have kids.
Yes.
So when you have kids, something changes. You take joy. It's not even an instinct. It's not even a duty, at least for me. You take pleasure in them having things, that, even if you don't have them.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's actually pleasure.
Sure,
it's not some sort of bullshit being nice or duty or anything like that. It's actually, I enjoy, if my kids have something that I don't have, that makes me feel better than if I have it and they don't have it. Which makes me difficult to understand my parents and our contemporaries' parents. They seem to very much be about them, and then you guys.
I think in our older years, apart from still wondering about this beautiful genre, men and women, is that's what we talk about most of the time. Parents. Now that we're our parents, there's so much that I don't understand about my parents.
Right.
That
right.
I took for granted back in the day, but like you say, you just said before, Dad was not the handiest guy. He was not born to be a bartender. I don't. If Gabe's gonna starve, I will be a bartender, and I will do anything it takes to make sure that he's all right.
But I think in his way he tried, right?
But his way is not
he
my
was
way.
tutoring English, he was tutoring math, and he tried to. But if I think about those days when I, as a sort of fully able-bodied person in my early 20s, couldn't freaking get a job in a supermarket, I'm wondering what a 50-year-old dude would have been able to aspire to. No, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too kind. But at the end of the day, like for me, like the one thing and I think all of us have grown up with this mentality is like, never again. Like I will.
Sure.
I will secure some resources. I will not die this way. I will not depend on, my children. I think all of us have pursued that, right?
I think
the girls and you and I and you.
Maybe that was
We've
their
always-
strategy all around. It's like maybe that was Dad's theory of raising kids. It's like give them a hard time.
Talk about being all in on the fucking strategy.
so that they.
I will make a man out of you yet.
Because the truth is that come this point, everybody around this table we all turned out okay. Despite
but let's like what I would like to just acknowledge here, like not to get too freaking new age about it, like is that we all carry a trauma, like
I disagree with that. I believe that trauma is made up. But go ahead. You know me, always opinionated, always have an answer for everything.
I 100%, my dude. But my point is that from us, from the family, just kind of living this way and this kind of long, drawn out series of kind of hardships. I think. In a different way, each of us in our own different way, and especially because of the difference in the relationship with your grandpa, I think it shaped us differently, but it was still traumatizing.
But I gotta say, it's not traumatic if you do not contextualize it. If you basically say that it was learning experience that helped me grow, it's no longer trauma. If you say, oh, I was hurt severely, it will injure me for the rest of my life, it left me scarred, that's when it becomes trauma. Say informative, not trauma.
It was valuable trauma, but trauma nevertheless.
Well, you see, the fact that you say that it's trauma shows that it is trauma. Like as soon as you say it's trauma, it will become trauma. But it's only trauma if you make it so.
Okay, maybe,
See,
but I still feel a little
I've been through
traumatized.
my fair share of difficulties in my life, even though it's not material. But I have to say, it's not traumatic for me. Those were learning experiences.
You're like incredibly resilient, and I hope your mom
It's
has a lot to do with it.
it's a mindset, Father.
I agree.
I think what Chendo means trauma. I don't think he means trauma in the modern sense of the word. I think he's mostly talking about unanswered questions, which will be unanswered because our parents are dead.
I mean, really, like I mean drama. Drama.
But it's funny. I'm
like,
surprised because we're sitting here in this round table talking openly about it. I've been speaking to Gabe about it openly, and to Fred, and to anybody who wants to hear, because it's not really a secret or anything like that. However, I'm wondering, out of the 5 or 6 people that are watching this video, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people have exactly the same kind of trauma, but I just don't talk about them, which actually creates a dark side in their, a dark matter in their heart.
I agree.
It shouldn't happen. So if you have it, comment.
There is an interesting point again from a slightly a step outside, looking at it objectively, is like the phase 3 really kicked in Malaga City, right? That was like so.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
So there's quite a good argument from an external point of view to say that the real victim here is in reverse order age, as in Lucas. Then you're meaning that you were 18.
Yeah.
Like crack on. You're grown up. All this drama, all these dramatics happened. You were gone, man.
No,
and you, to a degree, when your main drama, a lot of it happened when you came back from the UK. You're in your 20s.
It's true.
You see what I mean? But really, it's sort of Lucas who was born into phase 3. He never used a phase 1
Next
or 2.
podcast, we'll have Lucas here. Though.
Totally. No, for sure.
Like when we speak to Lucas about this sort of thing, he looks at us like we're crazy. He's like, I've never known all that cool stuff that you had before, that you feel so bad I'm not having it anymore. I never had it in the first place.
And that's the big difference. The big difference is that Lucas was born into poverty and into this situation. He didn't know any better, right? It's like being born blind. If you've never seen before, they can describe it to you, but whatever. However, if you go blind after seeing, then that makes a difference.
Yeah, this is true.
That's what happened. Lucas.
His perspective on your dad is so different to you guys.
Totally, but he had a much worse thing, which is like Chendo said, he actually lost his mom when he was 18, 20 or something like that, and then he lost his father because his dad just basically neglected him. That's why he came to work with me, to live with me. Sorry, not work, and Karen, and if you start asking Lucas, he never really talks about it, but I'm pretty sure as far as traumas are concerned, that's probably much bigger than the one that Chendo and I ever lived, right? Because by the time we were already quite old, and I don't know, it's different. Lucas was on his own as well,
Yeah, I mean, you could say when Chendo said that he raised himself, again from outside, and I would say that your sisters raised him, and then you guys finished.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a kind of like sisters
my mom
and
died.
you guys.
My mom died. I mean, I remember
You guys sort of finished
distinctly the night my mom died. Lucas just sat there and cried and said, "What am I going to do now?" Because he knew that he was alone. He knew that my dad would never do anything, and he didn't. And Lucas tells me of stories that where my dad was doing his own thing, and Lucas was just sitting there. Well, should I do my homework? Should I have a shower? Should I have dinner? Should I set my alarm for tomorrow? Because my dad was just not there for him. My dad was preoccupied in his world of conspiracy theories and trying to get a rich wife so he could get more money. And that must have been horrible for Lucas. I think, but he's never spoken about it. So, Lucas.
It is very interesting. We kind of had to have this conversation with all of the siblings, because each point of view is completely different. Well, I feel like your guys' point of view is more or less similar because you guys are a similar age, but then the lower down you go, like you said, there was different. They came into different points of the stages, didn't they?
Yeah, I'd love to know. Like the girls, they didn't get to go to Sunnyview for free.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. That's got to have some meaning in there somewhere, right? Yeah. Etc.
What I found quite interesting I don't want to say interesting because it obviously was a sad moment, was when your dad died, when your dad's dad died, my grandfather. It was interesting to see everyone's reaction because I was never close to him. I saw him even though I was the closest out of all my cousins to him, I never really saw him, and he never really talked to him, so I didn't really have a bond with him, you know. So seeing everybody's reactions, all the siblings' reactions to the death was quite powerful in a way, you know. My dad was kind of, you already saw it coming from far away, so you kind of already dealt with it in your own way, kind of. But for example, Dede, she took it a lot harder than any of the siblings combined, I would probably say. It was...
She still does it, yeah.
Yeah, it was very, obviously sad, but also very interesting in a, I guess, morbid way, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, she was very close to my dad.
Yeah.
You know, circling back to your very first question, one of the things I realized listening to this podcast from you guys is, you know, that in reality, like, you know, part of the impact of us living away is that you don't really know who your Uncle Chendo kind of is. You know, like, he's this dude who shows up every couple of years, and then you probably literally spent maybe a total of 50 minutes with me, you know, because we show up, we say hi, and then we go drink and eat. You're doing your own thing, right? So I think it's been helpful for me from that point of view, like to get to know you and to get to know what you think of us. And so hopefully today's session has helped you get to know, you know, your Uncle Chendo a little bit better, your cousin Victor.
It's probably the podcast where I've been quiet. I've barely said a word really because I've just been listening and taking it all in because it's a lot
also
of
big
new
takeaway is
information.
that the reason why we do this podcast and we release it publicly is so that hopefully somewhere, sometime, somewhere, so somebody out there
after the robot wars
will listen to it, and some of what we're saying will resonate with them, and instead of saying like, what are you guys talking about, we'll say like, damn, that's exactly what I feel.
I don't know about you guys, but the older I get, the less unique I realize I am.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? As in feelings, how I am as a dude, a typical husband, all the memes and all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? That's the just, you know, when
whether it be somebody that's thinking, you know, I mean, I'm pretty sure exactly what you said, Chendo. There's so many people that are pursuing a corporate career that are thinking right now, if they were watching, would be thinking like, that's exactly how I feel. You know, I feel trapped. I got my money, I got my house, I got my pool, I got my car, but this life I live just doesn't resonate with me.
Here's a question for you. Listen, what are you surprised about what he said today?
Quite a few things actually. But there's so much content. Well, throughout the years, you have pretty much told me pretty much what you think. I've been privy to your feeling of guilt as an older brother. I was quite surprised about the corporate thing that you're saying, because it is true that you're an artist at heart, but I was pretty sure that you dismissed it. As maybe you keep it in the family, like I'm an artist and I want to write a book, but that's just something that I keep here as a hobby or in-house, right? I didn't know that it actually affected you on your day-to-day work. That you feel so different within your peers at work because of that.
Me too. I thought you'd parked that side of you as a growing up thing. That's how I used to be, but I grew up.
Exactly.
I saw the light, and
I think that's.
I didn't think you still had that in there, you know. And also the bit I'm surprised about is what you say you're an introvert, because the persona of Chendo is he's the introvert. He's Chendo's brother. You know what I mean? The whole Chendo's brother thing we always joked about, which is because everybody liked you, you're so popular at school. You're the only guy from our class that the older classes wanted to hang out with. So you're seen as a very popular, funny guy. So to find out that you see yourself as an introvert is surprising to me.
I mean, you remember growing up when we were kids that there was the worst moment of life for us was when we had company and we were paraded as kids to say hi to all. Like I'm so shy, for me it was just like I just wanted to die.
This ambassador or whoever came down, is like, come on kids, time to come down.
And to this day, like I talk a lot in front of people, but it's like every time it's really hard, and every time I develop my own little techniques for how to,
That's a podcast on its own.
Calm down,
Because I'm really bad.
But no, I have a really hard time with people, Yeah,
All right.
full intro.
All right.
Awesome.
Anything else, my man?
I think it's a good place to stop it, to be honest.
I wish we had more
Anything else
time to do this again, like
Yeah.
before everybody left, because we do have things to say, but maybe.
you- Yeah.
Maybe it's the beginning.
We've already been filming for basically 2 hours. So, like.
Big editing job here.
Yeah.
No, man. Top and tail. Job done.
I'm not going to do anything. Nothing at all, man. All right, Mr.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. Nice.
Thank you. Thanks for
It's been
making
lovely
this
being
happen,
here.
Gabe.
for
Really
being here.
appreciate it. This was great.
And yeah, I think it was, like I said, I've never been more quiet and just listening in a podcast before because that was great. I really enjoyed that. Thank you guys for being on here.
It's been lovely.
Thank you for coming and thank you for being on here like always.
Thanks for inviting
That's
us.
it, of course.
Thanks
Is
for
there anything
having
you want to
us.
say
It's
before I sign off?
No.
I love this family.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah,
good,
that's
Orlando.
actually the perfect thing to say. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching. We hope you enjoyed. And if you disagree or agree, it's kind of very personal stuff that we said here, so I don't know if you can agree if you're not part of the family. But
Let us
anyways,
know.
Let us know.
But if you had similar situations, if you feel anything that we've said, let us know.
Yeah, definitely. And like always, like and subscribe, and see you guys next week.
Smash that notification button.
That's right.
Bye.